Hey guys. So first of all, I want to thank everybody who has subscribed to my channel. I am very honored and very grateful, and I really do hope that you have found my lessons beneficial. Now, for today's lesson, we will focus on how where you live can impact your life in various ways in celebration to my recent move to Raleigh. And I want to apologize for the delay in this video. It's been a bit longer than I wanted it to be, but my move has been a little challenging to say the least, which actually lines up to what I'm going to talk about today. And it provides a great example how certain energies in our environment can impact our daily lives. It's no secret that our environment influences who we become as we grow up. But what about when we're adults? How does environment influence us then? Surprisingly, there's a whole field of psychology dedicated to this called environmental psychology. I'm going to be sharing some of the studies from this field along with other environmental sciences, which then I will transition into human design and how astrology can help you decide the best place for you to live. Now, if you prefer, you can skip to whatever chapter you care to know about the most, but I do encourage you to listen to the physical and mental health options, as you may be surprised to hear where you live could be causing problems with your health and shaving a couple of years off your life. Human design and astrology can help you choose the right place to live to find love, bring in more prosperity, get in touch with your ancestors, opening up to spirituality, and a lot more. In addition, it may help explain why you seem to experience a lot of challenges or struggles in your life, especially if you've only lived in one or two areas. Now, if you're anything like me, you might have felt unsure about where you're meant to live in this life. I mean, despite myself living in various locations, I have yet to find that one place that feels really like home or a place that I know I'm going to spend the rest of my life at. Growing up, I dreamed of living in New York City and working for a magazine and imagining the glamour and the social life of the Big Apple. And as I did achieve some of that in different cities, I have yet to make it to actually New York City, and something seems to come by to shift my direction elsewhere each time I make that effort. But I believe I'll get there someday when the timing is right. And with that being said, every place that I have lived, though, has affected me in some way. Now, the choices on where to live have always been influenced by work, friends, dogs, which the move always really comes in very unexpectedly for me. Now, even though I have sometimes had that feeling like it's coming up, it's usually been due to some break in a relationship. And that's not really surprising considering I have the incarnation cross of the unexpected in my human design chart, and it's actually very active. Now, during my time in Denver, however, I learned something called astrocartography, which blew my mind because the energy surrounding each place that I have lived matched up with my experiences there. So that is why I purposely chose Raleigh based on my astrological chart to experiment with this concept, because it's easy to reflect back and see how something lined up in the past tense, even though most skeptics will claim that's just confirmation bias. Now, as I personally don't believe that is the case or that it's even just a coincidence, as I'm going to showcase this later in the lesson, but it is crucial to factor in all possible variables when to conduct a true experiment. This astrological experiment is quite exciting for me because not only is it going to allow me to provide an opportunity to see if astrocartography is a valid method for determining the right environment, but also allows me to play with the concept of fate and free will. If fate or predetermination is unavoidable, then the events should still play out despite my prior knowledge to the circumstances. Or it's going to answer the question, do we have that much free will to impact or change something that is seemingly predetermined? Because according to my chart, this spot here should change my entire life, from career to connecting me with the man I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life with. But before I jump into the celestial planetary influence on where you should live, let's dive into how this planet actually impacts you through the field of environmental science, starting with the most important factor in choosing where to live, simply being able to breathe. Now, it may seem pointless to factor this in as a subject, considering that the World Health Organization, as of 2019, states that 99% of the world's population is living in places where the World Health Organization air quality guideline levels are not being met. Yet, considering the fact that outdoor air pollution is associated with 4.2 million premature deaths annually worldwide, and is the second highest risk factor for non-communicable diseases, you may want to factor in how much you're being exposed to, especially if you enjoy the outdoors. I do understand, though, that there are some countries that have poor air quality, no matter what area, or you may not even be able to move to an area with better air quality simply due to affordability. But what you do have is a voice. And the more people that are aware of the situation brings a stronger force to demand change before it's too late. Yet I'm not naive to the fact that it usually takes a severe, unfortunate event to make change come about, especially when it comes to the planet. But even when these moments happen, humans, despite being the most intelligent animal, still don't seem to learn. Because air pollution is a consequence of the Industrial Revolution, which started in the late 18th century and continued through the 20th. It wasn't until after the infamous city smog events that took place in the 1950s and 60s did governments start to realize, like, this is kind of a problem. One significant event was the London Great Smog that took place on December 5th through the 9th in 1952, when a cold spell hit, prompting residents to burn more coal than usual for heating. During this time, a big area of high pressure called an anticyclone formed over London. This caused a thermal inversion, which is where cold air gets stuck under a layer of warm air, making the air stay still. This prevented pollutants from rising and dispersing, which led to a dense concentration of smog where visibility was only a few meters. People, though, still ventured outside, not understanding the damage, which caused acute respiratory problems to thousands and an estimated of 4,000 to 12,000 excess deaths. Now, this led to public outcry, and rightfully so, about air pollution, which made the United Kingdom pass the Clean Air Act in 1956. And this was one of the first laws that aimed at controlling domestic sources of air pollution. Yet, despite this, it still took the United States its own tragic event 10 years later to follow suit. In 1966, after a period of cold weather, New York City experienced a sudden warm spell over Thanksgiving weekend, which also created that thermal inversion, just like what happened in London, creating a layer of smog over the city. The fatal impact wasn't as bad as London, considering that there was only an estimated 168 deaths versus thousands, but the overall impact was severe enough to create a wake-up call and establish the national air quality standard set by the Clean Air Act of 1970 and the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA. Yet despite the combined emissions of 6 key air pollutants that have fallen by 78% since 1970, according to the EPA, the American Lung Association's State of the Air report from 2024 shows that 39% of Americans still live in places with failing grades of unhealthy ozone and particle pollution. Now, these types of pollutants, particles or particle matters or PMs, are essentially tiny bits of dust, soot, and smoke that come from cars, trucks, factory wood stoves, and even wildfires. And it can make the air look a little hazy. When we breathe in the air, it has these fine little particles. It can make our throat feel scratchy. It makes it harder to breathe, and it can even make us feel sick, especially if somebody has asthma or breathing problems. Ozone pollution is when the invisible shield high up in the sky that protects us from the sun's harmful rays is down to hang out with us over an area of where we live and breathe, no longer protecting us, but actually harming us. So when the sun shines on different chemicals that cars, factories, or other sources have been put into the air, it forms this toxic gas, and we breathe that in, and it hurts our lungs. It's like getting sunburned inside of our chest. The World Health Organization factors in these pollutants as well across the world, but also includes carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, which are caused by the combination of fuels and the transportation and industrial sectors, the burning of fossil fuels like gasoline, natural gas, coal, or oil, and the smelting of mineral ores that contain sulfur. Exposure to these pollutants can lead to strokes, heart disease, lung cancer, acute and chronic respiratory diseases, and reduce your lifespan by 2 years. And it's becoming more and more of a challenge with the impact of climate change. Now, I'm not here to debate whether you believe in climate change or not, because climate change is a thing. I do understand that the planet goes through a cycle of climate change naturally, but humans are speeding up the process, and there's plenty of evidence to support this. One clear example of how much humans impact climate change is simply looking at the Amazon rainforest, which is about 9% of the world's oxygen supply and also plays a huge role in absorbing massive amounts of carbon dioxide, which is responsible for heating up the planet. Yet 20% of the original Amazon rainforest has been cleared since the 1970s due to corporate greed, overpopulation, and increased agricultural demand for things like soybeans, coffee, and cattle ranching, despite that these practices can be done around other areas of the world. Less Amazon rainforest equals higher levels of carbon dioxide, which creates greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are warm. They heat up the planet, bringing warmer climate change. But the reason why I wanted to include this in this lesson is because I've experienced the impact air quality can actually have on you firsthand. Denver, despite being a beautiful mountainous city with lots of opportunities for outdoor adventures, is one of the most polluted cities in America. The State of the Air reports ranks Denver number 20 for the most pollutants by daily PM. In fact, all of the 25 worst cities ranked for short-term particle pollution are in the Western United States. As for ozone pollution, Denver actually ranks number 4. As for myself, I didn't really realize how much air quality does impact you until my first year living there. It was a huge adjustment for my health. I was sick most of the time, which usually correlated to poor air quality days, especially on days where there was high levels of smoke. It impacted my energy levels. I didn't want to work because I felt shitty, and I didn't want to bring my dogs outside either. So before making my current move, air quality was the first thing I investigated, no matter what the planets had said. I would not have moved here if the air quality was worse. Luckily, the eastern part of the state states aren't as impacted. In fact, some of the areas of North Carolina are ranked the cleanest places to live. As for poor air quality, here are the 30 counties that received a failing grade for pollution in this year's report, 3 of which I have actually lived for a year or more previously. I will also include the link below for the state of the air report if you'd like to read it yourself. There are other pollutants other than air that you may want to investigate as well before you choose a place to live, including water quality and checking for the presence of contaminants such as lead, arsenic, nitrates, or industrial chemicals, soil quality if you plan on gardening or buying food from a farmer's market, radon, which is a colorless, odorless, radioactive gas that seeps in the buildings from the ground and is the leading cause of lung cancer for non-smokers. But honestly, you'll be hard pressed to find a place that actually doesn't have this, even though some states are requiring now that homeowners are to install a mitigating system if the levels are above 4. There's also light pollution, especially if you require a lot of sleep or if you have trouble sleeping, and noise pollution can account to that as well. Studies have shown that long-term exposure to high noise levels can produce poor sleep quality and also lead to stress, which leads me to my next factor, mental health. Mental health can have an impact on our longevity of life as well, especially within our own community. As I've mentioned before, numerous times, humans are social species, which is why healthy relationships and social interactions actually extend life longevity. They help regulate stress hormones like cortisol and enhance the production of neurotransmitters that promote brain health and general well-being. Dan Buettner, an American researcher and author in collaboration with the National Geographic and a team of demographers, pinpointed 5 areas around the world where people have higher than average lifespans and levels of health, often living well into the 100s, which are known as centenarians. These areas have been designated as blue zones. One of the central findings from blue zone research is the importance of social interaction and community. People in blue zones typically have a strong social network that support healthy behaviors. They also have traditions and cultural norms that strengthen community ties. For example, in Okinawa, there are moais, which are groups of people who commit to each other for life, providing logistical, social, emotional, and even financial support. These networks enhance their members' qualities of life and reduce stress levels, which factor into longevity. Maintaining strong family connections is another common trait within the blue zones. Families often live close together or in the same household across multiple generations. This familial support system provides emotional comfort and practical help, reducing the stress of daily life, providing a sense of belonging and purpose. There are high levels of engagement in community activities and social events, which helps individuals in blue zones maintain a sense of purpose and keeps them active. Shared meals is another common factor in the blue zones. Social interactions often revolve around meals, which typically compose of healthy, locally sourced foods. Eating with others also tends to slow down the meal, leading to better digestion and greater satisfaction, with smaller portions contributing to lower rates of obesity and associated health problems. Creating environments that encourage social interactions, community engagement, and an active lifestyle could potentially replicate some of the benefits seen in blue zones. This might include urban planning that promotes walkability, community centers with facilities that have gatherings, and policies that support a strong work-life balance. This is supported by environmental psychology, which examines the relationship between individuals and their surroundings. It focuses on how the physical environment, whether natural or built, can influence human behavior, emotions, and well-being. It considers various types of environments, from home place to workplace to urban parks to natural landscapes. And one key finding in research has been consistently shown that access to green spaces can improve mood and reduce feelings of depression and anxiety. Green spaces are basically areas that substantially are covered with grass or trees or shrubs, like public parks, garden, woodlands, nature preserves, or even green corridors with like street trees or green roofs. And I can attest to this actually, because Raleigh has an extreme number of dedicated green spaces, and it's actually part of the city's planning. I mean, even walking around the neighborhood, it just feels so green. I mean, all the places I've lived has had green areas, but this is the first area that I've seen so much green within and out of the city. And I grew up in Wisconsin. So interestingly enough, green spaces, however, have also shown to enhance cognitive function, particularly in memory and attention. This is referred to as attention restoration theory, or ART. Developed by Rachel and Stephen Kaplan in the 1980s, the theory suggests that exposure to nature can significantly improve the ability to concentrate and restore cognitive functions exhausted by overuse. In our daily lives, especially in urban and work environments, we often use what is known as directed attention. It requires us to focus intensely and ignore distractions, which can be mentally fatiguing. Prolonged use of directed attention leads to mental fatigue, making it harder to focus and more likely to make mistakes. This state is actually referred to as attention fatigue, which which could easily be confused for ADHD, especially in children that do not get outside as much and are constantly using directed attention, such as in playing video games after being at school all day long. So going outside in nature, by contrast, actually engages what is called involuntary attention or fascination, which requires no mental effort. This type of attention is stimulated by natural settings with intriguing patterns, movements, and sounds like the rustling of leaves, flowing waters, or birds chirping. Nature provides a restorative setting where the mind can recover from cognitive fatigue. In natural environments, the soft fascination exerted by nature's stimuli allows directed attention to go to rest. It's kind of like how your muscles require relaxation after a really hard workout. However, according to art, for the environment to be restorative, it must fulfill 4 points of criteria. It has to provide a sense of escape from the usual settings of activities, so this feel of being away from your usual environment. And the environment is rich and coherent enough to engage the mind and promote exploration. The environment offers enough engaging stimuli automatically capturing attention, and the setting supports the individual's intentions and desires, allowing them to do what they wish. So this is just one classic example of how these green spaces can impact our mental health, but there are tons of studies on this, and pretty much all of them have shown the benefits of green spaces. So why does nature or green spaces make such of an impact? I mean, what does that mean as we continue to replace nature with urbanization? Well, besides pollution, as I've already discussed, it could also affect our mental health in more negative ways, as I believe that we've already seen. To answer how it affects us, one hypothesis surrounding our connection to nature is the biophilia hypothesis. This hypothesis was developed by Edward Wilson, and it suggests that humans have an evolutionary-based affinity for nature. This theory suggests that because our ancestors evolved in natural settings, we have this innate tendencies to seek connections with nature and other forms of life. Another theory is psychoevolutionary theory, which is developed by Roger Ulrich. It suggests that the positive reactions to nature are adaptive behaviors for improved survival. For instance, environments that had good water, habitats, or trees or open areas that allow for both resource and availability and threat monitoring is elicited positive responses that improve psychological and physical functioning. Personally, I believe it relates more to the theory around Earth's electromagnetic field known as the Schumann resonance, which gives off a frequency of 7.83 hertz. Some research and theory suggests that exposure to these natural frequencies can enhance human well-being and cognitive performance. The idea is that this frequency might align with the natural frequencies of the human brain, particularly those in alpha waves, which is associated with relaxed yet alert states. In 1960s and 70s, Dr. Rutger Weaver conducted experiments where volunteers lived in an underground bunker shielded from natural electromagnetic fields, including the Schumann resonance. Subjects experienced disruptions in their circadian rhythms, which is the natural body's sleep-wake cycle, and reported various health disturbances, including changes in mood and mental distress when isolated. However, to be fair, I will mention that there has been some debates around the validity of these studies, but I don't know. I mean, logically, I feel like that would make sense. I mean, we know that humans can sync up with the heartbeat of another companion or a loved one. Why wouldn't we want to sync up with the Earth's heartbeat as well? Speaking about being in alignment with our environment, let's discuss the next step in finding your ideal location through the practice of human design. I want to make it very clear, you must know your exact birth time to know the correct environment for you, because it's shown through your design arrow colors and tone, which can change within just a few minutes. Color, tone, and base is what I like to call below the chart. What I mean by this is, like, when you see your chart and let's say you have like gate 19, you will see it as gate 19.1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6, but it's actually 19.1.4.3.5, which is line, color, tone, and base. And this is a very advanced level of human design, and most programs don't even show you unless you have a pro account, other than just the arrows yourself. Now, for this lesson particularly, I'm going to use this website because this software allows you to have your arrows for free, along with some basic information surrounding your environment. But as someone like myself who's more advanced in the field, I'm going to provide some specific information. The left side of your chart, or the design side, is all about your body, and the 2 arrows on this side fall under the primary health system. The top arrow is represented by your sun and earth, which is regarding digestion. The bottom arrow represents our environment determined by your nodes, and the circle is for the color. The color in your environment showcases how your body, or as human design likes to call it, your vehicle, resonates to a certain environment and what is correct for you. It's not so much about a specific place, but a type of environment that can be deconstructed in various ways. However, according to human design, being in the right environment is essential for your health, meeting the right people that you are meant to associate with, maybe that be through business, romance, or friendship, and what you are meant to do in this life. One thing to note, though, is that Ra did state that your environment doesn't fully play a role into your life until after your Saturn return, which is usually any time between ages 28 to 30, even though he gives various examples of how this can impact children. But I suppose it was kind of just to focus on only if the child was struggling or unhealthy. If you have color 1 through 3, it refers to hardscapes, which means artificial or man-made landscapes, which is usually within an urban environment, while colors 4, 5, 6 refers to natural landscapes. In addition to that, you're going to see that the colors are actually expressed through evolutionary perspective, no matter where it's expressed, meaning like whether it's in your environment, digestion, your motivation and perspective. In fact, the colors, tone, base, and lines are all expressed in that nature, meaning like 1 is the most primitive in the sense of the primal instinct or basic nature of a human, leading up to 6, which is the level that slightly transcends human nature. As for the tone and the base, they are actually subsets of color, meaning that base influences tone and tone influences color. And there's also variable, which is determined if the arrow is facing left or right. Here on this program, though, it states for some reason that the tone of the lunar nodes do not carry any specific programming for your environment, which is actually not correct. The tone is what determines the specifics of the environment and the direction of the arrows. So tones 1 through 3 faces the arrow to the left, 4, 5, 6 will face the arrow to the right. The direction of the arrow is what determines if you're meant to be active in your environment, which is left, or passive, which is right. To be left in your environment, like I am myself, in fact, I'm all left, which is this ability to really focus in and use a lot of strategic involvement around your environment. But you also see this general theme of being observed, because the left creates action through a process that will arise itself out of the environment. And when those lefts create action, they are being observed by others. Lefts are the ones that get the certain amount of attention and create change within their environment. They are supposed to make an impact or influence their environment in some way. If you're right, you're meant to be an observer. You're meant to take in your surrounding and absorb information without actively seeking to influence or change it. You're meant to be still and allow things to come to you rather than pushing or forcing events to happen. Just by being present in your environment, you help others by having this calming and grounding effect. Rights often find themselves in the right place at the right time when they allow those natural circumstances to unfold. Color 1 is caves. Now this first color, your cave or home, is where you feel most secure, especially when the home only has one exit point. Because if you think about a cave, it has the same entry and exit that can be seen at all times. So the concept is really being able to control your environment for security and safety. And this is the most important aspect for anywhere you see a 1. I mean, not even just in the color, but also in the line. They need a sense of security. It's feeling safe within your environment. And most people that have caves tend to work from home or would prefer to. Or if you have to actually go somewhere for your work, you want it to be an office where you can close the door, which means you wouldn't do well in like a cubicle setting or an open space. This is also why cave people don't usually spend a lot of time in crowded group environments. Of course, I understand it's very rare when a home only has one entry and exit, unless you live in something like an apartment, because most apartments only have a front door unless you have a patio or something. And of course, if you have more than one exit point, though, in your home, most likely that other exit point is always locked or at a place where you know that no one's going to get to very easily. And one thing that I found fascinating is that Ra talked about how people with the caves environment tend to have their favorite place be their car. Because if you think about it, like that's going to be a very secure place. When you get in, you can now automatically lock the doors and you can see who's in the back seat. And you're the one that allows people to come in and out, especially if you're the driver. And I find it funny because I do have a friend that has caves for his environment. And he was talking to us about this fact that he loves eating breakfast, especially McDonald's breakfast, in his car every morning in front of a gym. Of course, he was sharing this about as kind of an ironic joke, but another friend had asked, like, don't you want to just go out and sit on the bench then? And he's like, nope, I just like sit in my car. And I'm like, that is the perfect example of somebody with a cave. Depending on the tone, you're either going to have selective or blending. Selective means that you have a left arrow and tones 1 through 3. If you have blending, that means you're going to be a right arrow and tones 4 through 6. Selective is focusing in on your security of your environment, which means you're going to be very, very specific about who you allow in your cave. You probably don't really care to have a roommate, or if you do, you're going to do like a full background check and you're going to be very particular. You may also be very sensitive to environments when you go to someone else's home. As for blending, it means you want to blend in your social environment within your own cave. You're more open to who you allow in your home. You may be the one that's like, hey, oh, you want to have a wedding? Why don't you have it at my place? Blending is the host of the dinner party, while selective is the one of the guests that's spends their time only talking one-on-one to each person. Also for selective, you may prefer to live in the suburbs, or you do a lot of research on which the best neighborhood or the safest neighborhood is. While the blending will probably prefer to be in the center or the epicenter of some kind of community or social area. Color 2 is markets, and 2 is all about being available and having selection. And this is the cave people evolving to move out of the caves and being exposed to an open environment. It is an environment that has a lot of options, and there has to be selection in everything, whether it be the people, where you want to buy your food, what you want to do today, where you want to walk. Now, keep in mind, all the colors are going to relate to the lines as well. So a line 2 is somebody that is meant to be called. They have this kind of natural ability that usually gets pulled out by somebody else recognizing it. So when you have a second line or a color 2, if it's someone that's not in the not self, when they get that call to answer who is right for them, they're not going to know that it's actually the right one and lose out on the opportunities. But when a line 2 is aware of its natural abilities and that surrounding, aware of its talents and pays attention and is in the true self or in line with their energy, they're going to receive a gift. And this gift is going to be this gift of discernment. And they're also going to receive the gift of the right people, the right places, and everything falling into place for them naturally, because the line 2s are also considered the naturalists, even though they're called the hermit. But what matters to the environment for a color 2 is that it holds variation and also a place where people can be found, because then they have a better chance of finding the right person and who they're supposed to be with, because they're supposed to be very selective about who they're surrounding themselves around, because they have all these options. They're meant to be very particular, and they're allowed to be a little picky, because they might be somebody that dates like 100 people, then all of a sudden they just find that right one person. Or they might be somebody that has to look at like 100 different places before they choose the right one, because they might want something very particular what they're looking for. Markets are particularly connected to the city living, and it's somebody that tends to live in the city area or very close to it, because that's where you're going to find the most selection. They don't really do well in rural areas. They need that hustle and bustle. They need those options. Now, if you're internal or left, you most likely will live in a high rise or some kind of apartment in the middle of some epic center of diversity. You might prefer to live above a business, like, those high rises in cities usually have some kind of business or retail space below them. When it's external or right arrow, this would be someone that's more adept to suburbs and out kind of like on the outskirts of the business center, but you're still able to get to it very easily, or you're accessible. Like you can get your groceries delivered by whoever you want, because you can still shop online. Now, someone who's a really good example of this that I know, unfortunately, is A, who I've spoken about in my previous videos, but he has markets internal, and he's a great example of this because he lives smack dab downtown in a high rise, like on the top floor where there's businesses below it. And when I had met him, and he had said he had gone on a lot of dates. And what was interesting is I said we had a 0.0007% chance of meeting, right? So he would never have met me if he lived anywhere else, or if he was in a rural area, definitely not. So because he wouldn't meet that many people. And as explained to me, that he is very picky of what he wanted. I mean, so am I, but he was very particular in it. And of course, the moment that he did somehow shift in alignment is the moment that he got rid of that. So just like kind of emphasizing my point in my previous videos where I said, like, there's not a lot of chances a color 2 will get. So when you get something called to you and it's the right thing and you choose to ignore that, or you don't recognize that and you end up losing it, the chances of you getting again is very, very slim. But of course, that's his own journey to learn. So let's get to color 3, which is my color and my environment, kitchens. And there's something to know about the color 3 is that when it comes to a line 3, it's all about trial and error. Like, you may not end up in the right environment of where you're supposed to be. It might take a couple places for you to actually get there, especially with having this color 3, if you are a line 3 as well. I mean, I'm a 3/6, which for my first 30 years of my life, I was a 3/3, and now I'm a color 3 in my environment. So I'm very impacted by 3s. And when you have a color 3, there's this potential of discovery. Ross stated, like, if you went back, a couple 100,000 years ago, all the 3s are going to be hanging out around the fire, because that's where things are happening. Things where things were changing. It's where we learn, like, ooh, we could cook our food and we become smarter. Great. And that's what kitchens is all about. Kitchens is industry and manufacturing. It's an environment of creation and creativity, of where transformation is taking place. I mean, when you speak of a literal kitchen, it's not like people go and sleep in a kitchen. It's where something's cooking. So kitchens could be you working in a hospital or even a research lab. It could be literally within your own house, creating ththings in the kitchen. I mean, I'm doing this video right now and I'm in my kitchen basically. And for myself, I've always ended up in cities, like, without even realizing it. I tend to migrate to the fastest growing cities in the United States. Like when I moved to Seattle, it was just starting to grow because Amazon had just like opened up their headquarters there. And then when I moved to Denver, I found out that was the fastest growing city, which is why one of the reasons why I had to leave, because it got so expensive the 4 years I was there. And now living in Raleigh has just been announced last year, like this is one of the fastest growing cities in the US. But Raleigh is also this hub for research and innovation with the Research Triangle Park. And I particularly looked for that. I want to do genetic research, and which is either in California, which I knew I didn't want to go to, New York, or Raleigh. So this is where I chose. I mean, I could have gone to Boston, which is another big area for it, but I'll explain why I didn't go there when it comes to my astrocartography. But either way, what's really important is that even if you have a right or a left arrow in kitchens, in color 3, you're looking at this mutative stage. So you can still be very active within your environment. Kitchens is all about creating change and making an impact and changing your environment. You're meant to change the world. You kind of have this ability to create change. Now, as for wet or dry, this literally means like climate and landscape. So wet is humid, green spaces, sources of water. Dry is not humid and has more of a barren landscape like the desert. Now, I'm kitchen's wet, and ironically, I've lived in a lot of drier places, but whenever I'm in a dry environment, I also tend to get sick more, and my skin like literally hates it. In addition to that, I said I'm a quad left, meaning all my arrows are to the left. And I have usually made a very big impact for all the cities I've gone to, except for Denver. Because when I lived in Vegas, I became very well known within the city. I was a little bit of a socialite, as well as when I lived in Seattle, I had a magazine and I created a lot of change. Now, as for Denver, I did not make much of an impact because that was during the time for my Uranus opposition. So I actually went from kitchens to valleys wide. And I don't want to make this too complicated for you, but it has to do with transits and your life cycles. Going from kitchens to valley wide is completely different. I mean, there is a still sense of community and communication, but it's not about making an impact so much. It's about being in your environment and having these wide open spaces of energy flowing, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But it doesn't mean like you have to go someplace in a different environment during your time. It's just how it worked out for me. And it's just kind of like I shows case on like how I subconsciously live my design through my environment without consciously knowing it. So as for these higher numbers, we're talking about natural landscapes or the overall area instead of the actual home itself. Color 4 is mountains. And this is technically a foundational color like line 1, but for the higher trigram. So they too need a sense of security, but in a way they need to be able to see everything in their surrounding, a view from the top of a mountain. So mountain environments are ones that are up high, offering this broad perspective. This visual control helps them feel in charge and at peace, especially when their environment has whatever it is they need. Like they're the type of people that are going to stock up on essentials. Like Costco is going to be your favorite spot and pick out everything and throw it in storage, ensuring that you have everything you need in case something happens where you're stranded up on the mountain. People with mountains tend to thrive in elevated places, both physically and often doing better at higher altitudes, and actually might prefer living in elevated areas, and also metaphorically by being the ones that often take the higher road when it comes to disagreements or situations. And due to this elevated perspective, they can also be seen as natural leaders or guides and provides insight and directions to others within their environment. Theory kind of goes around too that the people with mountains actually don't need as much oxygen. Rod said, like, if anybody's gonna smoke in their environment, mountains is the only one that should. Not that he was encouraging smoking, and not that I am either, but it's just saying that you don't need as much oxygen as a normal person. I do not know if that's exactly true. For your health, please always do what your doctors say first. People with mountains can also be drawn to want to have this like psychedelic experience, or like ayahuasca or taking mushrooms, because these experiences also reduce the oxygen in their brain. And mountain people also have this natural resilience or adaptability for challenging situations, usually within their environment. I mean, after all, not everyone can scale a mountain, right? They gain clarity and insight by being above the hustle and bustle in everyday life. They also don't like really to be in crowded environments because they prefer more controlled social interactions, because it's about quality over quantity. They will seek solitude, not just for comfort, but also because needed for mental clarity and focus. Now, if you are somebody that does not live in a high elevated area or not up in a mountain, I'm not saying you have to live in a literal mountain, but the point is that you should always aim for the highest point available within your surrounding area. That could even be the top floor of an apartment building. Or if you're experiencing issues at lower elevations, maybe it might be beneficial for you to take some kind of mountainous retreat to see if that helps improve your condition. Now, if you're active, you need to come down from your vantage point every now and then and engage with your community. You have to have that balance of solitude with active participant and social interactions. If you're passive or right, you tend to remain more isolated and preferring to observe from this elevated position and letting people come to you rather than seeking out interaction. Color 5, valleys, was initially described like in the earlier years of human design as the opposite of mountains. Valleys are environments that are close to the ground and it's somebody that needs a higher level of oxygen. It's advised for those in this environment to never smoke because it will make a huge impact on their lungs. It is characterized by these open spaces and the flow of energy. of some sort, whether that be through water or traffic. It can be like literal valleys, wide fields, or these large open spaces within an urban setting. Now, as human design guru, Ross spoke of valleys as also being this environment that supports sound, social interaction, and community engagement, ensuring that they communicate and connect easily to somebody. A key feature of valleys is this flow of energy, which, like I said, is represented by water or traffic. There has to be a constant flow behind or near them that supports their environment. It's because the acoustic properties of valleys allows sound to carry, symbolizing the importance of communication for people within their environment. Think of it, that iconic scene like The Hills Are Alive with the sound of music, where the character is just galloping through the fields. Now, people in valleys tend to engage in gossip as well, which is actually seen positively as it facilitates communication and connection. Also, people with valleys tend to be more adaptable because they have the way of creating flow and also going with the flow. If you have wide valleys, these are usually large, wide open spaces. Like I mentioned, like I was valleys wide when I lived in Denver. I lived on 33 acres. There's this wide open space, and then I have a gulch behind it that water used to flow through. So valleys wide usually have like a wide river or a lake or a highway, freeway of some sort that has a broad flow of energy and sound. Narrow valleys, on the other hand, are more smaller, confined spaces like alleyways, small streams, or narrow passages. The flow of energy and sound is more concentrated, like as an apartment is, with an alleyway behind it. If you are unable to live in an area like that, just ensure that your living space at least has some good airflow and open communication lines, whether that be within the physical environment, like an open space, like open floor plan, or engaging yourself in the community. Utilize like fountains, or get a like a little water machine or something for your home, because that will allow the flow of energy to go through. If you're someone that experiences a lot of health issues in your area and you're at a higher elevation, try visiting some lower elevation places to see if that improves your health, and then you'll know if that's where you're meant to be. Now, the last color here is shores, and this represents boundaries and being separate from the environment. This environment emphasizes the importance of having very clear boundaries and being able to see what's happening around you and know what's coming into your environment. And this is because as a line 6, it means like you're separate from the rest. There's always some kind of separateness from a line 6. Color 6, tone 6, base 6, does not matter. It's always about a little bit different than the 1 through 5s, because shores encourages opening up perspectives to a broader horizon. It's about being available within your boundary to influence those around you, because again, line 6s are also the role model or the guru, and people that have shores as their environment naturally attract people to them. And when they embody them true selves or become that role model, others are drawn to them without any effort. Shores people tend to have fewer social restrictions too, and they are known to know a lot of different types of people. They aren't restricted to a specific social circle and like to interact with diverse groups, but they also need a balance between solitude and social interactions, because they thrive in environments where they can retreat within their boundaries, but also engage when needed. And the concept of boundaries doesn't just mean like within their environment. It also extends to the psychological and emotional boundaries as well. Maintaining clear boundaries helps them manage their energy and interactions within their environment. Shores also supports a natural flow of energy, similar to how the tides move along the shore. And this can also translate this need for an environment to feel dynamic and alive. So when you have shores as your environment, you may gravitate toward living at the edges of areas, such as the edge of a park or a cul-de-sac, and you may prefer where there's like some kind of clear boundary line. And your home can also be in this way where it has that openness, but also has defined edges as well. Those that have natural shores are places like natural boundaries, like beaches or areas next to water. People with like naturals and shores in their environment often feel a strong connection to water. And this is evident in the readings that I've done. I have quite a few people that have shores, and they feel so much better when they're close to water. And they always have this desire to kind of head to the beach or go towards the coast. Artificial shores are these man-made boundaries, like on the edge of a park or a boundary between different types of environments, such as a residential area next to a commercial one. If you have health issues, like spending time near water or environments with these clear boundaries might help improve that. And even if you don't live near a place with water, visiting places like that can even help you feel more aligned and at ease. All right, you guys, we've gone through a lot so far. So we've gone through the quality of physical health and social interaction and mental health and the right type of environment for you. Now I'm going to get into astrocartography, and this is the right places for you based on your natal chart and of course what you desire most. And this is a complicated modality, but I'm going to do my best to describe this so you can at least get a general idea for a place. But if you want to compare it with your natal chart and your solar return, you're going to need a reading, which I am very excited to announce that I'm going to start offering these readings now. And I'm having a special intro price until the end of August, which I'm going to share more about after I go through this. So astrocartography is a modality within Western astrology, and it puts your natal chart on a world map. And this was developed by Jim Lewis in the 1970s. I want to clarify, though, that there are two different types of modalities when it comes to mapping astrology. Astrocartography can also be referred to as relocation astrology, but there's also something called local space astrology. And this is mapping your chart for your current location branching out from your home. It's kind of like feng shui type thing where you can see the planetary influence within your environment to improve your daily life. But this lesson is about finding the best location in this world. So understand though that everything may line up the way that you want it. As I've discussed today, you have to decide what your priorities are. Maybe your environment is more important than the things that you desire. Maybe air quality is the best thing that's important to you. Whatever it is for you to decide. But if everything that you do want is wrapped up in a nice little bow for you at one specific place, that is most likely the best place that you should go, which happened to work out that way for myself. But you know what? I've only been here for 2.5 weeks, so who knows what's going to happen. But one thing is to understand is that when you get to these places, it might be something that you feel right away, or it might take a year or something for it to play out. It just depends on how involved it is in your chart. Also, you do need your birth time for astrocartography because it can shift your entire map even just by like 5 minutes. If you do not have your birth time, you can seek out a rectification astrologer, which is something that I'm actually going to be learning here soon. Or, you can also use a pendulum if you feel comfortable doing that. Or if you were born in a hospital, hospitals probably most likely still has records of it, or check your birth certificate, even though some states didn't start doing it until later on. But the first things first, okay, let's get to a chart. So to view your chart, you're going to go to astro.com and you're going to go under free horoscopes. You want to go under locational astrology and then hit astro click travel. That will pull up your chart. Now you can see this chart is a little overwhelming and there's a lot going on, but you can see right here, this little pinpoint is actually your place of birth. I'm going to mention too that it's best to do this on a computer or a tablet. If you do this on your phone, it may be a little bit more confusing because when you click on a place and zoom in and you want to find a city or whatever, you're going to see on the right here that it's going to give you a little bit of a description, and you're not going to see that on a phone. You're going to it's going to be underneath. So it's going to be responsive and you're going to have to scroll down. All these colorful lines are planetary lines known as power lines. And there are 4 versions of each planetary line. Now, I believe astro.com states that the radius of these lines is 250 kilometers or about 150 miles. But I did read in numerous books that it can actually be up to 600 miles or 955 kilometers. There's a lot of debates around this, and I don't really know for sure because I've always lived really close within those 250 miles, but those miles can be quite significant because for myself, like I was born during something called the Great Conjunction where Saturn and Jupiter are conjunct. So I have to be very careful because Jupiter is like a really great line to be part of, but Saturn can be extremely challenging. So those miles do make a huge impact if I want to be close to my Jupiter line, but out of range in my Saturn line. And you can always check with your own history to see if where you have lived anywhere within the radius and experienced anything that line has reflected, which I'm going to break all these down in a minute. So here's what to know. When it comes to reading a chart, you have planetary lines or power lines, which are these lines here. And these highlight areas where the specific energy of the planet is the strongest in your life. And within these lines, you're going to see these circles, which most of them for myself and a lot of others that I've read too are in the ocean. So not to be concerned about it too much. But if you do have an area where you live or you're interested in and you're close to one of these circles, it's actually called the zenith of the line, meaning it's the most powerful point where the energy is in that line. And now, as I mentioned, there are 4 versions of each of these planetary lines, and this has to do with the angular houses, which is the most impactful in your birth chart. The meridian lines, these are the lines that run north and south, or the 10th and 4th house axis, can be indicated where the planet is on the MC, which you can see here. These are MCs, and MC is the 10th house and represents your career, public status, and life purpose. It is where you're going to be most likely noticed and make a significant impact in your professional life. Now, you'll see another one that will say IC, which for myself, I actually have to go over to Europe for. And this has to do with the 4th house, which represents where you're going to feel most at home. Remember, I said I feel like I don't have any place I belong here in the US, and it's because I don't have any IC lines within the United States, which may be why. IC lines are going to feel where you truly belong. It's often also associated with emotional connections and possibly ancestral ties, because this area can evoke really strong feelings and comfort of security, because it's usually influenced by the moon, which rules the 4th house, and that governs emotions and subconscious. I've actually never been overseas either. So once I do go to Europe, which is definitely on my bucket list, it will be interesting to see how I feel over there. If it's a place where I'm like, ooh, I want to move here and this is where I want to live the rest of my life. Now, the zenith lines are the lines that run east to west, and they show where a planet is ascending or setting. On the chart, it looks still north to south, but you have to understand that these lines are actually curved. So the 1st house, or the AC, and this is about self-expression and personal impact. This is the line where you're going to express yourself the most authentically and influences your personal identity, how you present yourself, and where you can make a significant impact as an individual. Now, the setting is a DC, and this is the 7th house, which relates to relationship and partnerships. So the descendant line is all about your interactions with others. It's a prime area for developing business partnerships, friendships, and long-term romantic relationships. So you're also going to need to understand your birth chart when I said before. And it's to see like how these lines are aspected for you. Just because like I said, like, oh, Jupiter's like a great line. Great. Well, it may not be for you, depending on the aspects of your chart. However, one thing that astro.com does really great is that it will show it for you. So when you click up here, it's going to say with harmonious aspects and with disharmonious aspects. Now you can see like that's a little overwhelming if you're someone that has a lot of aspects. So once you get to an area that doesn't have any of these power lines, like here you can see I don't have any power lines next to Raleigh, but when I hit in my harmonious aspects, I get a couple of them that pop up. The aspect lines are going to be just as impactful as the power lines. And then lastly, another thing that you actually are not going to see on the chart, but when you are looking to the right and you click on a place or whatever, you're not going to hit show details, okay? Then you'll see crossing lines. Every place, no matter where you click, is going to have one kind of crossing lines. These are called parent lines, and these have to do with where two or more planets are angular at the same time. And this creates like a very powerful blend of these energies, and they can have a significant impact on your life. It brings like the qualities of the planets together with these kind of themes. And when it comes to the radius of these lines specifically, there's no specific radius in all honesty. I couldn't find one at least. And it says it depends on the impact that they make on your chart, but the range kind of varies overall. And I won't be able to go through all the parent line combinations, but you're going to see a few of them because I'm going to showcase them in my own chart. And then you also have to take in the angular of the line as well. But let's start. So sun on astro.com is represented by a light orange or a dark yellow, however you want to call that. The sun line boosts your confidence and highlights your self-expression. You may feel more self-assured and charismatic in these areas, but you also want to be mindful of your ego and keeping it in check, because the sun can also influence a more egotistical area if you're not in balance with yourself. Generally though, the sun line is a positive influence and it brings in abundance and it allows you to enhance your personal power and presence. Unless the sun, like I said, is in detriment or poorly aspected, then these areas will be challenging for you. Also, if your sun lacks aspects, like maybe you don't have any aspect in your sun, then this line can actually boost your self-confidence and personal growth. It would be a good area to go so you can express your sun a little bit more. As for the impact of the angulars, I'm not going to go through each individual line, but let's just say along your sun DC line, right? Relationships will play a key role in helping you shine. Others will recognize your potential, and your relationships will also help support your growth and self-discovery. If your sun is positively aspected in your chart, the sun line is one of the best lines you can go to. The moon line, which is this dark blue line here, or royal blue, is where you're going to be in tune with your emotions. You might feel more emotional in these areas, but also more connected to your inner self. And this line can also help you bring a sense of belonging or comfort, similar to that feeling of home. Because like I said, the moon rules the fourth house, emphasizing the home and emotional security. And so if you don't have any ICs like myself, like for me to get closer to my moon line will help me feel a little bit more settled in my area. The moon line also impacts your subconscious mind. You might experience vivid dreams or heightened intuition in these areas and have a deeper connection to your inner thoughts and feelings. It can also highlight themes related to your mother or maternal figures or nurturing and caring for others. So you might become more nurturing. It can also enhance fertility, which makes a more beneficial place if you're trying to conceive. Also, it's a place where you might feel more connected to your family or ancestral roots with that fourth house connection. And I'm just going to mention this. I'm sorry, gentlemen, if you don't want to hear it, you might want to mute this part. But if you are someone that has a monthly cycle, your moon line can actually affect your cycle significantly. So if you're someone that struggles with painful or heavy flows, you might want to see if you are close to a moon line, because I'll tell you one thing, I'm closer to my moon line on the east side of the states. And this is the first time that I've been as close as I have been to my moon line. You can see my moon DC line is not that far here from the coast. Within a day, I actually got my monthly, and it was the longest and most painful one that I've had in probably like 10 years. I'm really hoping that does change and gets adjusted back to my normal. So for Mercury, you're going to want to be careful of what you're looking at, because Mercury is shown by this neon green or this brighter green, but it does look similar to Venus. But one thing with Mercury, you can always see the little horns. The Mercury line is a place where communication flows easily. This is an excellent area if you're for writing, teaching, and speaking, or any activities that do really require clear and effective communication. Expect to network and socialize more in these areas, because you're going to find it easier to make connections and share ideas. Mercury also governs learning and intellectual pursuits, and this line is ideal if you want to study or take courses or engage in any intellectual conversations. Mercury also will enhance your adaptability and versatility. It's a great place exploring different interests or multitasking. And if you have a career in education, journalism, or writing, or any field that requires really sharp communication skills, the Mercury line can really help boost your success and opportunities, which actually showcases during the time that I lived in Vegas and Seattle. So my time in Seattle, I have my crossing Mercury and Chiron Chiron line. And Venus also plays a big role in this area, which I'll make a point of in a minute. I also had my sun squaring my ascendant. And this is where you're going to see where challenging aspects can also cause things, because as I mentioned, I own a magazine in Seattle. With it being my sun, it's like where I'm being publicly recognized is going to create tension. And I got a little bit of backlash there because people didn't like the changes that I was making. I first got into media though in Las Vegas, which when I click on Las Vegas here, you're going to see that my Mercury is crossing my Jupiter. And this is a great area to expand my media skills. It was a great place to pick to decide to get into media. You'd think it would have been New York, but for me, it's actually, this was a better area because I have that crossing Mercury and Jupiter. So it was allowing me to expand in my communication skills and where I first got into working for a magazine. If you're a teacher, moving to or spending time near this Mercury line can enhance your ability to really convey information and also connect with your students. If you're an author, it could be a great place for you to want to write your next book. You also want to also consider, by the way, your ruling planet. So like if you are Gemini or Virgo rising, the Mercury influence will also be particularly strong. And that's also significant because I am a Gemini moon, and you can see my moon was playing away in Vegas as well. So these all three playing together, it just was the right combination for what I needed in the environment. Now, for the next 4 planets, sect or whether you have a day or a night chart are going to influence these as well. When you look at your chart, and if your sun is below the ascendant or in the bottom half of the chart, you have a night chart. If it's above or on the top half of the chart, you have a day chart. Okay. So those are the day chart. Mars is going to be the most challenging planet for you. So your Mars line is going to cause problems. Again, this is general, by the way. I want to keep reiterating that because it might be different for your own personal chart. Those with a night chart, Saturn is going to be more challenging for you. Now, if you have a day chart, Jupiter is going to be your most beneficial planet or your most benefiting line, bringing in positive influences and opportunities, while in a night chart, Venus is going to be the most beneficial planet, also especially enhancing love, beauty, and harmony. But when I say about how your own personal chart can impact you, I said I have a day chart. So Mars is supposed to have a stronger impact in me compared to Saturn. Jupiter is going to be my most benefit planet, but Venus still will be beneficial, but it's going to be slightly less dominant. But especially for me, like I said, Venus is in detriment, but so is Mars for me. So what's actually unique is that even though Mars is supposed to be my most challenging line, Saturn actually affects me a lot more than Mars does. And it's because Saturn's exalted in my chart, meaning he's going to make a bigger impact than Mars will. So it really does make a difference depending on your own personal chart. Now, as for Venus, this is going to be the area where you'll have significant impact on relationship, love, and finances. It's going to be where you attract and nurture romantic relationships, or where you find harmony and affection more easily. Also, it will depend on where Venus sits in what house in your natal chart. So if, like, let's say Venus is in the 2nd house, Venus line will affect your finances more versus your relationships. If it's in the 7th house, it might affect your relationships more than your finances. Is this area that's going to bring these opportunities in for wealth and financial stability. Additionally, like, Venus is regarded to beauty, the body. And so it's a place where you're going to be surrounded by beauty, and it's also a place where you'll appreciate the art. On the Venus ascendant line, for example, this is a location that's going to influence your self-image and physical appearance. If Venus is well aspect, you're going to feel more confident and attractive. Going back to Seattle, right? Venus was sextile to my ascendant, which is a good aspect. That's a positive aspect for me. It was also where Venus was crossing Uranus. So my self-image or my physical appearance is going to make an impact. But understand, like, if Venus is afflicted in my natal chart, like I said, mine was in detriment, it can also bring up challenges of self-esteem issues or even body dysmorphia if it's pretty negatively aspected. Venus also governs creativity and artistic expression. So this line can also inspire you if you are an artist or you're looking for some kind of muse area. Also, like I said, Seattle, and where I had my magazine and where I really learned and expanded my more graphic designing abilities. Also, my last significant relationship was in Seattle. A majority of my time I was in a relationship. When you're looking for love, moving to or spending time near your Venus line can increase your chances of finding some kind of meaningful relationship. Mars is represented by red, of course, with the little circle and arrow. And Mars lines, like I said, can typically bring in challenges and bring in conflict and tension, especially if you're near your Mars descendant line. You might experience more arguments or conflicts within your relationship. If it's on the midhaven or the MC, Mars actually can drive extreme ambition and career focused energy. You can become very passionate about your goals and your work. Mars also governs sexual energy, so it can bring a significant improvement in intensity into your sex life, and it might be a place where your desires and passions are also heightened. But it is important to approach these areas with caution. I mean, there's always going to be some sort of conflict probably surrounding you, or a challenge, or this potential for increased aggression, especially if you have a date chart or if your Mars is exalted. People ask me, like, what is the best line? Like, if I should go to a place, where should I look? And I'm like, well, it kind of depends on what you're desiring. But if for just an overall line, Jupiter is often recommended due to too is just a positive planet, like the planet of abundance, good fortune, and luck. I mean, we want to live there, right? And this is represented by the fuchsia or magenta line. I don't know, whatever, bright pink. It is considered a benefit planet, especially if you have a day chart. For example, on the Jupiter ascendant line, this enhances personal growth and expression. So you're going to broaden your horizons, or you learn something new, or you may even do like higher education. And Jupiter is a planet of abundance and good fortune. So being there, your Jupiter line will attract wealth, opportunities, and overall prosperities in all aspects of life, including love, money, and career. It rules the ninth house, which is associated with that higher learning, travel, and philosophical exploration. So this will also encourage new cultural and education pursuits. However, keep in mind that I said Jupiter lines are generally positive, but if it's somehow inflicted in your natal chart, this also can present some challenges of being too expansive, or you might overdo things. It's where you might over indulge, or if you have gambling issues, it might be where you become more of a gambler. So you want to be careful of how it lays out in your natal chart. But for a majority of people, like Jupiter line is going to be the fail-safe line to consider. And this is actually the line that I purposely went towards. I've never been close to this line, and I'm going to explain this a little bit. I'm not going to get into this right now, but you can see where my Jupiter and my Saturn line are conjunct, right? So again, I have to be very careful because Saturn lines are more challenging, especially if you have a night chart or if it's exalted like myself. And it's going to bring in feelings of isolations, restrictions, and boundaries. These are places where your life significantly going to face life lessons, because that is what Saturn's all about. It's about teaching you lessons and being the judge of the chart. It's not all bad. There's always some good thing coming out of it, right? So if it's on the descendant line, like Saturn can actually enhance your sense of responsibility and commitment in relationships. So if you're one that struggles with commitment issues, this might be a line that will help you develop stronger and committed partnerships, but it won't come easy. I'm just going to make it clear on that. It's going to present you with a challenge that's going to allow you to grow and become more committed. If it's on the midhaven line or the MC, it can boost your commitment towards career and be more dedicated towards your work, but it can also be a place where you might become a workaholic. That's the only reason why I'm like, well, it's not super bad if I get close to my Jupiter line here, because the Saturn line is the MC, but I also know that I can be a workaholic. So that's something I have to be wary of. Living near your Saturn line is going to most likely present obstacles and tests that's going to help you grow and develop. So it may be some place that you want that. You might be looking for growth, but generally this is not recommended, especially if you're trying to seek ease or comfort, because these areas are going to demand hard work and perseverance. I personally would never advise someone to move to their Saturn line unless they're really prepared for the lessons and challenges that it would bring. As for Uranus, which is represented by this lighter blue line here, Uranus lines are excellent for innovation and technology and invention. So if you're creative or want to engage in some cutting edge field, this line supports new ideas and unconventional thinking, but you should be prepared for chaos and unpredictability, as that's what Uranus does, because it can bring in these sudden changes and drama, and it makes these areas very exciting, but also potentially unstable. So it depends on how it is in your chart. Uranus rules Aquarius, which is also associated with intelligence and humanitarian efforts. So this might be a great line if you want to get involved in activism or some sort of social cause, or want to create change within your community. Also, it's a great place for intellectual pursuits and learning something new, especially in innovative fields or technology. Keep in mind that if you move someplace where you are on your Uranus descendant line, it can sometimes disrupt relationships. Like when Uranus comes through in your 7th house of your chart, it can sometimes represent conflict that leads to divorce. So it is really important to check your natal chart or your relocation chart for specific impacts, which I'll showcase that in a bit. Now, Uranus lines are ideal for those seeking excitement, innovation, and social change, but they also require adaptability to be able to handle the accompanying chaos. Uranus plays a big role in my chart, mostly because it's conjunct with my ascendant. Uranus actually trines my MC in Raleigh. So this means it's a great place for me to study genetics. It's an innovative field and something unique and different. Neptune, which is the purple line, this is an ideal place for deepening your spiritual practices, for meditation and yoga, and really connecting with your inner self. However, there's mixed feelings about this line, because Neptune can also create illusions and confusion, and it can make it very challenging to see things clearly. It can lead to misunderstandings, and also this sense of being disoriented within your own life. Also, if you have addiction issues, stay far away from your Neptune line, because Neptune will exacerbate these tendencies. It's important to really approach this line with caution if you're prone to substance abuse. It is a place, though, if you want to temporarily go to a place with your Neptune line, it's suitable for journeys of the mind and spirit. So if you're planning some kind of spiritual retreat, or maybe you want to take an ayahuasca journey, the Neptune line can provide the right environment for a deep transformative experience. However, ensure that you are very grounded before you go, because you want to make sure too that whatever journey that you decide to have is going to be very intensified in this area. Pluto, which is one of the black lines, which is very fitting for poor Pluto here. And this is a really powerful area for deep transformation and personal rebirth. If you're going into a witness protection program, I'd say okay, great, then go to a Pluto line. Because this is a place where you're going to be seeking change and growth, but it also supports intense personal development. It's going to have definitely chaos and significant challenges because Pluto is always associated with upheaval or breaking down old structures to make way for new ones. So about death and rebirth. Now, some astrologers I heard actually on Chris Brennan's astrology podcast suggest that the Pluto lines can actually enhance your ability to communicate with the dead or experience paranormal phenomena. And so this could be kind of an intriguing line for those in mediumships or wanting to explore the afterlife. For example, like when I visited Salem, which is near my Pluto ascendant line, I had a vivid experience of seeing a ghost. It was crazy. I've never seen a ghost before, and it was so clear as day, even though I will say, like, I was halfway asleep, but it was the only time I've literally ever seen a ghost. And so this really kind of aligns with Pluto's association of these unseen transformative experiences. Another funny story is too, like when I was researching astrocartography, and I often ask my friends are a lot of my guinea pigs in my learning abilities here. And I actually messaged a friend who frequently traveled through an area where her Pluto line went. And I messaged her randomly one day and I just said, hey, did you ever talk to dead people when you were like driving through Kansas? And she's like, this is the most random question I've ever had anybody ask me. She's like, but now that you mention it, I mean, that was definitely the area that I could channel. So it kind of underscores the unique influence of Pluto lines. So if you're interested in mediumship or like even the occult, the Pluto line can really provide the right environment for these types of pursuits. Pluto can also impact your intimate sex life as well, since it is part of the 8th house, can make a place where intimacy is a little bit more transformative. The Chiron is also a black line, but it is represented by a little key. Chiron lines are places of healing. It focuses on personal and relationship wounds, and this line can help you address and heal deep-seated issues. Like on the ascendant line, you can work on self-improvement, address personal trauma, and really grow emotionally and spiritually. On the descendant line, Chiron is going to promote healing through relationship. Area may push you to confront and heal relationship wounds, making it a place for transformative partnerships. My Chiron DC line and my descendant line right next to Denver. Now, what's really interesting is, like I said before, I moved to Denver. I did not know anything about astrocartography, but I chose Denver because of my dogs. And I wanted to go someplace where I could heal. I literally said that, like, I need to go and heal from the relationship that I was in, that I was in a very dark place. And so I ended up choosing Denver. When I found out that my Chiron descendant line was right next to Denver, I'm like, of course it was, because this is how it was supposed to work out. Now, like I said, it also brings relationships that are going to cause this transformativeness to push you to heal within those relationship wounds. I won't repeat the whole story, but you guys can go in my past lessons because this is significant as it regards to my solar return this past before I left Denver, which is about going into some kind of relationship that was going to force me to heal, whether I liked it or not. Also, to keep in mind too, that if you go into your Chiron, it's a great place for those that are looking to enter the healing professions. Like being next to your Chiron line can significantly enhance these abilities for you, or at least encourage you to want to learn. I actually learned Reiki as well when I was in Denver, and I believe that was also before I discovered astrocartography. And even though this place, and just keep in mind as well, is that like usually when it comes to healing, it's not easy. It's not going to be like, oh, just next to my Chiron line, it's going to be a snap of the fingers. It's going to probably be some very transformative or challenging events that may happen that are going to push through that. Because, when you want to look to certain names of the planets, you might want to look at the Greek mythology or Roman mythology behind it, because it's going to kind of give you an indication of what may or may influence that planetary line. And what I mean by that, like Chiron was the wounded healer. He had to go through a lot of pain to be healed, and he was a healer himself. Now, the lastly is the nodes, and the nodes are connected to your destiny and life purpose. The nodes are also a black line, which show like this. Now, where you see a node in the MC, that's in your north nodes in the MC, that means your south node is in your IC. The south node is going to represent past life, or the skills and experiences that you bring into this life. Being near a nodal line, it's going to evoke a sense of familiarity. Past life connection, you may have lived there prior. Is that when I first came to Raleigh 20 years ago, I was like immediately fell in love with it. I was like, oh, I could see myself living here someday. And I just like felt connected to it in some way. When I go to these harmonious aspects, you can see my moon nodes trine my sextile MC. So this means whatever my destiny is, what I'm meant to do in this life is going to be easy for me to achieve here. But it also means that myself is on my IC. So I might have lived here in a past life. And same with New York. I mean, New York area for me too has that same trine and sextile. So line is actually a little bit more powerful in New York than it is in Raleigh. But I will say, like, the first time I was in New York, like I could just navigate that state like no other. Like people were asking me for directions. So either way, the north node is associated with your future and your destiny. It's where you're meant to grow and evolve. It helps you find your life purpose and kind of fulfill your potential. If your north node is on the descendant, it can also signify people that you meet who are pivotal to your destiny. So that's why I chose Raleigh.
I mentioned as well that I did consider Boston, which honestly I personally love. I've spent time there and I just think it's an amazing city. So you can see when I go over here to Boston, it changes quite a bit. Just shows how much a short distance can change dramatically. Because this is going to move my Saturn line closer to me than my Jupiter, meaning that Saturn's going to be more impactful and Jupiter may not be able to come in and save the day. On top of that, I have Chiron and Uranus crossing each other here, which means any healing that I do go through during this time, especially when it comes to relationship, it would cause a disruption. It's going to cause some kind of chaos and be very unexpected. And I am very much ready for that to be less of in my life.
Another reason too is like the moon crossing Jupiter is literally considered one of the best lines in the chart. Like this is like the line to go to as long as these lines aren't poorly aspected. And it's my Jupiter MC. So abundance in my career, life purpose, social status, and relationships, which is backed up with the moon DC, which means an emotionally secure relationship. It's supposed to connect me with an emotionally secure and available man, since Jupiter represents, like I said, the masculine counterpart. I mean, and if you've heard my history, like I have never experienced an emotionally secure and emotionally available man. But it was something that I asked for before I met A, which I think the universe had a little too much faith in that outcome, or there was some kind of misunderstanding, because I wish I could share this part of the story with you, because it's actually hilarious, but that would reveal A's real name. And I just don't have the heart, or I don't go back on my integrity to expose him that much. But either way, the universe has a mistake to make up for, and I believe it will, which I'm going to show the case that in a minute. But like I said, I have these conjunctions, so I still have to worry about my moon and Saturn line playing out, because the Saturn crossing moon is considered the worst combination to get. It's a place where you can get isolated and you feel super alone and become kind of depressed. Even Saturn MC line, so it won't be as bad career, especially because Saturn sits in my 10th house, and so does Jupiter. Jupiter and Saturn don't get along, and that's why the conjunction between these two does kind of bring in some kind of expansion, but also restriction. And this is well known if, like I said, you know Greek or Roman mythology, because in Greek mythology, Jupiter is represented by Zeus, while Saturn is represented by Kronos. The story of Kronos, or Saturn, is Zeus's father. So Saturn is Jupiter's father. According to myth, Zeus, or Jupiter, killed Kronos and took over his rule. This mythological conflict mirrors the astrological tension between these two planets. And Saturn is going to bring in some challenges and restrictions, but ultimately, this does mean that Jupiter will triumph. Because these planets are so impactful in my chart, the moment I moved here, these planets started playing a role. Like within days, like literally the next day, I got here on a Saturday. On that Sunday, I got an email stating this remaining balance of something I've been waiting to get paid off happened. Like, and this is a big freaking deal. Like the very next week, I found out that I messed up on something else and I actually lost quite a bit of money. But the payoff was way greater than the loss. However, with that loss, there was a mistake made by the other people. So I'm hoping I filed a dispute. So we're going to see how that one plays out. I might be able to still get that back. Next, I rented a box, like a U-Haul box, to move here. Well, they accidentally screwed up somehow and switched my box with somebody else, and mine stuff got shipped to Washington State instead of North Carolina. Now, U-Haul has been very good about this. They claim this isn't a common mistake. They were very apologetic, and they took care of me and reimbursed me for everything. So yeah, it sucked because it took 2.5 weeks to get my stuff, but it's fine. I managed, and I saved like $1,500 moving. Right there is a beautiful example of Saturn and Jupiter fighting. But another example is the actual location, this place I'm living at, I chose because I needed a yard for my dogs. Up to the landlord to take care of the lawn out here. And my dogs are like, we're not going outside because the grass was so tall. So I contacted my landlord, because you need to get the maintenance people out here to like mow the lawn. And they came and they just weed whacked it. So like within 2 days, the grass was long again. And I'm like, fine, I'm just gonna go out and get a lawnmower and take care of it myself. So I looked on Facebook Market and I randomly came across this one, like almost brand new. He was like, you know what, if you can get here by noon, you can just have it, because I'm just trying to get rid of it. So I got a free lawnmower. I mowed the backyard, and I sent a picture to my landlord. I said, this is what it looks like when you mow a lawn. And she was like, that looks beautiful. Would you be willing to mow the entire property in exchange for a discount on your rent? And I'm like, yeah, because you know what? I love to mow lawns. I think it's fun. And I enjoy the activity. So right there, again, a challenge was presented that would have caused disruption, but instead Jupiter still won out in the end.
One thing that's unique about myself is that I do have knowledge of human design, and the gates that we have in our chart line up to a specific planet. I also took this in as a factor when I was looking for a place to live, and how that will make me more active within my environment.
Jupiter for me is gate 46-4 and gate 18. So correcting what's been spoiled. So my correction, being able to correct what's wrong with society. Hopefully, I said in my last video that I believe that if I can prove reincarnation, that it will change the world, because it will allow people to realize that we connect with other people and hopefully bring people closer together. Also, gate 18 is in my Saturn too. Gate 46 has to do with the body and the love of body. So it should make me more active, and it's line 4, so it might make me even more active to find like community involvement in activities, meaning like maybe I'll join a volleyball team, or I say that because there's a lot of beach volleyball courts around my area. There's also like a tennis court. Maybe I'll learn tennis with somebody and I'll get into tournaments. Or gate 46 is also a very sexual gate. It can increase your sex life.
Even though Jupiter moon is the best line, another bonus, I guess you can say I have, is that with gate 14 being in both my unconscious and conscious Uranus, this is going to bring in more prosperity for me. gate. Gate 14 is power skills, but it is a gate that brings in prosperity, whether that be through money or resources that you need to sustain yourself. In addition to that, I can look at my nodes, which after my Uranus opposition completes at the end of the summer, gate 31 and 56 are going to be more influential than the 41 and 60, which is great since 60 is all about limitations and is going to release those limitations and getting stuck. And 56 is the gate of the storyteller, which only strengthens my ability to be able to share my lessons on YouTube. We have to look to the moon, which is 41 and 45. Before COVID, part of my media company, I produced a lot of events, and it was something that I took a pause, obviously, when COVID hit, but it was something I never really got back into. It can be very exhausting, especially with the type of events that I was producing. So this might be an area, though, that I get back into that. And 45 is a money gate as well. 41 is about dreams and fantasies. So this might be an area that will help push me to write fiction or a fantasy novel, which is actually something that I've been thinking about for a while. Pluto is at gate 32, and 32 is continuity or achieving what it is that you want to do in business, especially since Pluto's in the MC.
The last step in this is actually pulling a relocation chart. And that's something that you're going to want to do to see how it affects your natal chart when you move to a different area, and also a solar chart. So to do that, you're going to want to go back to astro.com and you're going to hit extended chart collection. You go under chart type and you want to scroll down to the bottom here, and you're going to see the relocation chart. It's going to ask for a reference place. Just hit that, see that, right? And then hit show the chart. On the bottom here is where you can choose. It says choose a different reference place when you want to check it. I use the Placidus house systems for this. I know some people are very strict on the whole house system, but personally for myself, it's just that the Placidus system works the best for me. So it's up to you to decide what house system you want to use. What changes is that, first of all, it moves my Mars into my 7th house, which means in relationships, it could cause more like combative relationships, even though I don't really feel that way, because I think for me, like, I'm not really one that fights unless I really pushed in some way, but what it will do is enhance my sex life, which will give me a pretty strong sex life for the next partner I have. It also moves my Pluto from the 11th to the 10th, which is a death and rebirth in career. Palmistry is actually connected to astrology. So if you guys are all familiar about it, this is kind of random, and I don't know if you guys can see this very well. I'm going to try to, let's see, can we do it? Maybe. So there's this line, there's a middle line here that's going to be your fate line. So this is your career line, right? Now, what's significant about mine is, I don't know if you can see it here, but I have a break in mind, which means I will have 2 career paths in my life. It's going to transition and have a different career altogether. And my left side's like that too, which means this is what's meant to be in this life, but it's also in my relocation chart. So this is a positive thing for me. It also moves Uranus out of the conjunction with my ascendant line, and it puts it in the 12th house completely. If I want to study reincarnation or genetics into past lives and something that's unique to me, right? It's more beneficial for me for it to be here. Also, it makes me a Sag rising instead of a Scorpio rising. Now, like I said, I'm always going to be a Scorpio rising, but Pluto's not going to be as impactful, but Jupiter is going to be more impactful, and that's going to override Saturn. So this backs me up because Jupiter is going to become my ruling planet in this area.
Now, the very last thing that I mentioned is pulling a solar return chart for the year. Here you guys can see I have compared what my solar return chart would have been if I stayed in Denver versus moving to Raleigh. Look at the solar return chart. No matter whether it's in Denver or Raleigh, there is a yod again for this year. I had one last year as well. And it means like whatever's meant to happen this year is going to happen no matter the way it decides to play out. There is a fated event destined to happen. So the first thing I want to look at is the ascendant. If I was to stay in Denver, it would be in the 5th house. Moving to Raleigh, it moves my ascendant into my descendant. It flips the 2. If there was a similar event in regards to this, it would be in terms of relationship. It's going to be some kind of serious commitment. Staying in Denver might have led me to get pregnant, which honestly, I really don't care to be this year. Or the focus in the relationship would have been more on this creative expression and joy and fun. But usually having the ascendant there is something that would affect me myself. And so I take that as I could have possibly gotten pregnant or a child would have been involved of some sort. Moving into the descendant, it means that there's a focus on the relationship still, but it will be something more serious and more committed. There's a different theme around it. There's still just the relationship and how the relationship impacts me individually. In regards to love, I would want to look to Venus as well, which Venus in Denver is also in the 5th house. Comparing that to Raleigh, it actually moves Venus into the 4th house, which has that theme of love and moving in together, which seems a bit fast to be able to meet somebody, then move in together within a year. However, one line I did not point out to you guys in Raleigh was that my Venus is crossing my moon, which actually can indicate a rekindling of a relationship of some sort, which is a little confusing to me because I'm not sure on who that would be. I can't think of anybody that I would be interested in rekindling things with or having anybody wanting to rekindle things with me. But if that was the case, moving in together wouldn't seem that quickly to me then. But it could also be a friend or somebody that I've known previously and then we reconnect. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that I was in a relationship with somebody, even though it does specifically say for that line is a rekindling of past love. We shall see. Both show, though, Jupiter's transiting in the 7th house. So whoever it is that I am meant to be with in this lifetime will happen this year. I am supposed to meet that person. Jupiter represents our male counterpart. Also, there's a relation to this because if you look down here, you're going to see too that Jupiter moves into the 1st versus the 2nd in Raleigh. I've been told that my significant other is meant to help me in some way with career. It's supposed to get me to my purpose, or they're going to have some influence on how I get there, or may even participate in whatever discovery I'm supposed to make. And so the fact that Jupiter's in the 1st house shows the impact that he's making in my life. That was actually a theme between A and I as well, but that didn't work out, obviously. So I guess the next person will have to pick that up. The sun is sitting in my 3rd house versus the 4th. And this will mean that not only will communication be a huge theme this year, but since the 3rd house also rules intellect, and so my intelligence is going to shine, but it is something that tends to threaten more men that I've dated. I'm not sure why. I guess in a way it could emasculate somebody if they felt threatened by that, but this should at least mean that my significant other should actually appreciate my intelligence and actually respect it, or even be proud of it, especially since I said the sun is in the DC line for me here. As to when I'm going to meet this person, well, if I wanted to base it off of my last year's solar return, when it came to A, I met him 2 days before my birthday. And in my solar return chart, it was significant because I had Pluto in the 1st and then the sun was in the 7th, which showed that was the theme for the year. So usually when it's the theme for the year, it happens pretty close to your birthday. So either it's going to be around my birthday, very shortly after, or may even be before. Mars being on the ascendant versus it being on the 2nd house cusp is also something that's going to show this passion and ambition that's going to be very strong for me. And again, emphasizes that sexuality in relationship, especially since the ascendant is in the ascendant this year. A key point to this as well is that Pluto is in the 9th house. It switches from the 10th to the 9th when I moved to Raleigh. And this is the best house for Pluto to be in. It means that whatever I'm going to be learning new this year, I'm going to dedicate myself. It's going to be kind of this obsession, which the last time Pluto was in the 9th house for me was when I learned human design. And I learned it very quickly. I spent 2 months, 8 hours a day of just reading and studying. So this will be that kind of same theme for me. And I believe this will have to do with the genetic basis of what I'm trying to understand, because I have been studying genetics for the past 3 years on and off. It's something I've been doing on the side because I have, of course, responsibilities and my job right now that doesn't allow me enough time to do both. So Pluto coming in on the 9th house should cause some kind of transformation or almost create a sense of positive chaos that will help bring in something so I can learn what it is that I need to learn, and I'll learn it very fast. Uranus being in the 12th house is actually quite significant as well, because the 12th house is related to reincarnation and past lives. So to make an innovative discovery in this field backs that. And it's something that would come through really quickly. So after I spent all that studying with Pluto, it may be that Uranus comes in and it kind of just clicks for me with this discovery. And it's innovative in a field that doesn't typically look at this. But it being in the 12th house also would say that it would probably be towards the end of this year. And Saturn also goes from the 12th to the 11th. The 11th house is usually friends and community. And however, it also represents our goals and our dreams and the things we want to achieve. So it can be too that it's going to make me more committed to achieving those dreams. In addition to that, it shifts Neptune from the 12th to the 11th, which represents spirituality, intuition. And I'm a very spiritual person, as I've mentioned, and it's about finding that spiritual community that I'm looking for here. It's being accepted into this group, especially since I'm going to be looking for something that's probably very anti-science. To get involved with somebody and say, hey, I want to prove reincarnation. I think it's in our DNA. Do you want to help me with that? Or finding the right community? I mean, a lot of people in science would probably laugh at me about it or not take me seriously, but here they will, because I'll be able to find that group of people needed to achieve that. And there's a lot of other things here I can mention, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my time on it. I just wanted to give you kind of a clear indication of where we can definitely make an impact on how our lives play out.
The last thing I'll bring up too is when is the right time to move? So our techniques that you can use to predict that, you want to look at the activity in your 4th house, 3rd house, or 9th house. Now, some people say that it has to do with Uranus being in one of those houses that will shift you. When I moved, I knew it was coming because I have a lot of 4th and 5th house activity going on right now. That's another reason why I believe that whoever I'm supposed to connect with will be towards my birthday, because a lot of my stuff is moving into the 5th house soon, which is romance and new love or rekindling of some kind of passion. Saturn had moved into my 4th house 2 weeks before I moved. 3rd house had to do with more local moving, meaning like you might move within your own neighborhood. 9th house is where you're doing a long distance move. It could be across country or into another country. And then the 4th house is your physical home. So if there's some kind of movement going on in there, that might be an indication of you having to move. If you got through all of this, God, thank God, like, thank you. This was a long video, but as I said, I'm super excited to be offering readings now. And you guys can go to my website. I have a link below. So if you are interested in learning more about your astrocartography and you really want to figure out where the best place for you is, you could book a reading with me. And I'm offering half off my readings as an intro or a celebration to my move. And it's going to be until the end of August. The readings are going to be probably about an hour. Maybe it might even be a little bit longer. I'm not really one that's super strict on time. It will be at least an hour. But what we're going to do is either you're going to tell me what place you want to move to, what area you're looking at, or what it is that you want out of the area. We're going to dig deep, man. We're going to go into what that area is going to bring for you, or we're going to go backwards and we're going to try to find the area that's best for you. We're going to pull an astrocartography chart. We're going to pull a solar return chart. We're going to pull the relocation chart. And I'm also going to pull your human design chart to make sure that we're in the right environment and see what gates also impact you in that area. So we can really narrow down and see how much it will benefit you. Completely up to you guys. If you want to book a reading, I would love to be able to help. If not, either way, I hope you have learned something from this video and this helps guide you on being where the best place. And I will make sure to give updates, and I'll have to remember to do a lesson a year from now to see how this all panned out and see how things are going. And if there are some kind of events that do happen in between there, to see how the lines play out, I'll definitely make a mention of that as well. So again, thank you very much, you guys. Check the notes below for the promo code, which is going to be video, by the way, to get half off that reading. And if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. If you need any clarification on anything I said, I will make sure to monitor those and answer them the best I can. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, guys.